Hi guys, this is Ron, welcoming you to Ron's Amazing Stories. Well, as you might have gathered this week, I took the week off to get caught up on some work that was sadly neglected. What we have is a replay of a show that appeared in August of 2016 as part of the month of Spooky. Now, if you remember, Jim Harold was a part of that show, and we had a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you live next week. Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we go to the graveyards so you don't have to. On this episode, we have the finale of the month of Spooky 2016. It's hard to believe that the month is over and Halloween's already upon us. I hope you and your family enjoyed this year's event and that maybe we chilled you just a bit. We end this year with the best tradition yet. Jim Harold is here. Well, the truth is he was here. You see, we have already recorded the show. Now, I could spend a whole lot of time explaining this time dislocation, but wouldn't it be more fun if you just experienced it for yourself? Well, hold on, and by the way, remember to breathe. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here at this graveyard at an undisclosed location. I'm looking around and I'm seeing a kind of an open field right in the middle of this graveyard, and someone has built up a campfire. It is quite large, booming actually, and it's billowing smoke that is giving the whole scene very spooky atmosphere. There's a fog rolling in at the same time, or maybe it's the smoke and the fog. I really don't know, but whatever it is, it's allowing me to see the patrons that are gathering for this special event. Now, what I'm seeing are a group of ghosts here, and oh, look, and there's some goblins getting together. I really don't like those guys. They kind of tricksters, and I don't know how they got in, but they're here, and I'm seeing some spooks, and boy, I hope those aren't demons back there. The demons scare the living daylights out of me, but they're there with their red eyes and looking on at the scene, and oh, and there's a chill in the air, but you know what? I don't know if it's the chill from being cold or just being terrified, but that's what I'm seeing now. Oh, wait a minute, over in their corner, I'm seeing some movement. I believe, yes, Jim Harold has arrived. He's standing with an entourage of, well, I don't know how to describe that. We'll have to ask him about that. They are definitely ghostly. I would call them knights. Yeah, they are definitely wearing armor. I don't know what that's about. They're heading to the... he's heading to the stage. He's grabbing the microphone. I think he's going to start talking. I'm going to stop now. Let's see what Jim has to say.
Zasan. Hello, everybody. Well, my friends, my goblin ghost friends, I am so glad to be with you once again. It is Halloween time, and we all know what that means. I have released yet another campfire book. This one is Campfire 5, and it is full of your stories. Now, I want to say that I've dedicated it to you because without ghosts, how could we have a book full of true ghost stories? I'm so glad to be with you tonight, and I know we're going to be sharing some stories, so warm yourself by the campfire. I know you're probably very cold, so good to be with you again.
Well, if you don't mind, Jim, I'd like to step up to the mic and welcome you to Ron's Amazing Stories.
Hi, Ron. How are you? I know we've got a lot of ghosts here, but it's good to see a living person, too. And always good to see you.
Yeah, and it's great to see you. And I got to tell you, I'm a little scared. I don't know how you feel. I do have to ask, were those actual knights that brought you in?
Well, I like to be modest, but maybe. But yeah, well, I guess you could call them knights. I guess I'm trying to be humble here, but what can I say? The Campfire series is growing every year, and this year I upgraded to knights.
Wow. Well, that was impressive. So the ghosts are ready, and I'm ready, and I've placed a couple lawn chairs right there by the fire. It is a chilly night and spooky, and I heard there may even be some thunder coming later on, just to add some atmosphere to what we'll be doing tonight. So what do you say we go have a seat and let's talk about your new book?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, come with me right over here to the fire. And Jim, have a seat. You'll notice there's a thermos there. It's got some hot cocoa, and I don't know where the cookies came from, so you're on your own on that. But I did bring the thermos.
Well, very good, very good. I'll look forward to that in between breaks, and I know later we have a spooky story to listen to as well.
Yes, we do.
But I'm so excited. Campfire 5 is out. We do this every year. And actually, there's a little bit of twist this year, Ron, and you may be aware of it. In fact, I think you are aware of it because I had a new editor this year.
You did? Huh.
Yes. And his name was Ron from Ron's Amazing Stories. You did a great job. It was a lot of fun to work with you on the book.
No, not Ron from Ron's Amazing Stories.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I knew he was a good radio personality, but I didn't know he was such a fine editor.
Well, you know what? This, I'm going to say, was one of the most unique productions that I've ever worked on, and I thank you for the opportunity. I really do. It was fun working on your book.
It was great. I enjoyed it. You had a lot of great constructive input. I think you made it much stronger, and it's doing very well. It's already had been up for a time and been the number one Kindle Supernatural bestseller in that category, and also I think it's currently the number one bestseller on the Kindle in the unexplained category, or unexplained mysteries category. So obviously people are reacting to it. I think it has 4.5 out of 5 stars. I'll take that. And it's been very well received. So obviously you brought your A game, and it was great. And again, the best part is, along with our ghostly friends here, sharing the stories of our campfire callers, whether they be about ghosts or some of the other things we cover in the books.
Oh, yeah, there's everything in there from, and hey, I can actually say, because I was involved in it, there's everything
Absolutely.
in there from cryptids to ghosts to, well, even a demon.
Well, it's interesting because I didn't realize this, but sometimes when you work with somebody else and you verbalize, I have a philosophy about these books, and I think this philosophy was kind of played out in this book too. The idea that, yes, in keeping in mind our surroundings in the graveyard here, don't want to upset the ghosts, but ghosts are an important part. They're the plurality of the stories. But when we talk about the supernatural, there's much more, like black-eyed kids and shadow people and cryptids and Ouija boards and UFOs and head scratchers, and then some of the more poignant stories. So I've always wanted to kind of keep it reflecting the show, where we have a variety of stories, and I think we certainly did it that time, but plenty for the ghost story lovers out there.
Oh, yes, definitely. You allowed me to, last week, play kind of in a prequel. You let me play one of the stories from the book, the Fire Marshal story.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, the response that I've had from that has been off the hook. People are just really been fascinated with that story. So, and that's the one that opens the book, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, I always like to open the book with one that you just kind of go, wow. And I like to close the book in the same way. Kind of a couple of my favorite stories usually go at the beginning and the ending, because I always want people to have something to think about also at the end of the book that kind of makes them think, maybe there's something to this stuff.
Well, that one, I think, is one of the more rich stories in the book. And by rich, I mean just full of twists and turns and things that make you go,
the Fire Marshal card definitely was. I mean, the way it all looped back together, and that reminds me, and we've talked about on your program, I'm sure, and I've talked about on many programs, probably in my show's history, the most famous story we've had was the Roadhouse Saloon. And the fire marshal car, the fire marshal car is, if I could say it, fire marshal car is much like that there's a lot of kind of loops that kind of all connect together at the end. And some people say some of the stories are very simple and very straightforward, and that's true. A lot of them are. And then you have the more elaborate ones like the fire marshal car. So glad to kind of mix it up and give people different things to look at.
Another thing that I was very, very proud of in the book, and I'll get to that in a minute, but this ghost right here seems to have his hand raised.
Yeah. Yes. May I help you?
Well, Jim, I happen to speak a little bit of ghost, and he does have a question he'd like to ask. Do you mind answering it?
Oh, I would love to. I have a lot of questions I'd like to ask him, but by all means, please go ahead.
What he wants to know is, how can a ghost get on your program?
Well, I guess they could always make an in-studio appearance, although that might be a little disconcerting. Or they can go to jimharold.com/campfire and sign up. And if he's got access to a phone or Skype, or, maybe there's some kind of otherworldly way to jack into all of that, we'd be glad to have his story.
Okay, does that answer your question? He appears to be nodding, although his head fell off.
Oh, that's going to make it hard to tell a story.
Well, hey, life of a ghost,
Yep.
All right, well, the thing that I was going to mention is there is one particular story in there that I had something to do with, and you allowed me to actually write a story for the book. And I want to publicly thank you in front of all these ghostly people for allowing me to do that.
Oh, absolutely. One of the stories I had selected was your story. And it's interesting. I've even, since we spoken, I haven't even told you about this off air, have had further validation that people are reporting shadow people wearing fedoras. Oh. And yes, it's apparently a thing. And we didn't know this when we did this, and I had selected your story as one, and I thought, well, really, rather than me trying to edit it and have Ronald look at it and try to edit my editing of his story to begin with, I said, here's what you said, Ron. Why don't you just fix it up the way you want it, and we'll put it we'll put it in there as is. So I appreciate that, and it was a great story. And again, one of these weird stories of shadow people, which I never realized was so prevalent until I started doing the show. And one of the most interesting aspects that people report is this idea that the shadow is perfectly dark. It's not a shade of black. It's like somebody cut a hole in the universe. Yeah. And I think that's always an interesting side of it for me.
And, if I had to describe what I saw, what you just said is exactly correct. What I saw was just a perfect cutout, and it was just maintaining that space. But it was broad daylight, for heaven's sakes, and one of the brightest days of the year. In fact, that day, there was a UV warning. It was so bright.
Huh.
And you just I wasn't expecting that to happen to me, number one, because I was a staunch unbeliever, pretty much. I was going to say it just happened, and I'm going to turn my phone off.
Brought to you by Old Spice. Yes, friends, we'll do it in 40s style. Yes, friends, are you looking for an aftershave that makes you feel like a man? Well, then you need Old Spice.
Well, now I have to leave that in.
Maybe we'll get an ad deal.
Yeah. Or maybe they'll get me for copyright infringement.
Well, we can only say good things about Old Spice. So
That's
everybody
right.
Go out and get Old Spice.
I'm not just a Old Spice reporter. I am a user, too.
There you go.
Okay. Anyway, as I was going to say, to close that little section off, thank you, Jim, for allowing me to do that. That meant a lot to me. You have no idea.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, Jim, you got to tell us a story from the book. I mean, you just got to.
Well, let's see here. Which one are we going to do? I have a lot of favorites in this book. It's. I always like to say this is kind of like telling asking which one's your favorite child. One that I really like was Uncle Gene Sees Dead People. This story was by Jaime in Alabama, and he told us about his Uncle Gene. And he said his Uncle Gene had always been able to see ghosts. He said he sees them just like we see someone standing in front of us. Specifically, he sees full-body apparitions. Now, one day, Uncle Gene was at his place of work. It was a factory, and he saw a man on the plant floor looking at one of Gene's co-workers. And Gene's like, I wonder what's going on with this guy. So he goes over to this man and says, can I help you? And the man said, well, I was coming by to talk to him, pointing at the gentleman who was working away. But he looks like he's busy. Can you tell him his father came by? So a couple of days later, Uncle Gene saw this coworker and mentioned to him, hey, your father came by here to see you the other day. And his coworker got very pale and asked Gene, describe him. Uncle Gene described the man he'd seen the day before, and the guy got even paler. He said, I don't know how to tell you this, Gene, but... And he stopped right there. He couldn't finish the sentence. He was so freaked out, he pulled a picture out. And he shows Gene and he says, is that the guy? My uncle said, yeah, that's him right there. The coworker said, I don't know how to tell you this, Gene, but my father's been dead for 2 years. His Uncle Gene said that this coworker would not talk to him for about a month after that. When he would see him at the plant, he would just go the other way. Uncle Gene said, I didn't do anything. I was just delivering a message. And in the book, we go on and talk about another instance that happened with Uncle Gene. But that was the one that caught my attention. Imagine walking up to somebody thinking that they're full flesh, talking to them, and then finding out that you were talking to a dead person. Pretty creepy.
Oh, I can't imagine. Now, while you were talking, the ghost behind you there looks like he might have a question. Shall we talk to him?
Absolutely, yes. I'd love to hear your question.
All right. Go ahead, sir. I get that, yes. Oh, well, you sure you want... Okay. All right, here's the question, Jim. He wants to know, after hearing that story... What's it like carrying around all that flesh all the time?
Well, actually, right now I'm carrying around a little more flesh than I'd like to. I need to work on that. Hey, I'm perfectly comfortable with it, and I'm in no hurry to let it go, except for that maybe extra pounds that I'm carrying around. But in general, I want to hang on to my flesh as long as I can.
And she still appears to be nodding. Her head stayed on, though.
Oh, that's good. That's good. We're making progress, Ron. We're making progress.
All right, Jim, let's move on. That is one of my favorite stories from the book. Do you have another one you want to share before we get to today's creepy story?
Well, actually, we start with the first story, so let's finish with the last story. And this is absolutely one of my favorites. This one's a little more poignant. This is about Aunt Anita, and this came to us from Sean in Maryland. He talked about his great Aunt Anita, and she was quite the character. She lived in Huntington, West Virginia, which was his hometown. And great Aunt Anita was a self-taught herbalist, linguist, calligrapher, artist, musician, music teacher. She played the violin and piano, and he said that she was one of a kind. Now, towards the last few years of her life, she gave piano lessons to students that she called her scholars. So anyway, one of the family members, one of the other women from the family came over and had tea with Aunt Anita. And Aunt Anita kind of dropped a bombshell, kind of matter-of-factly. Yeah. She said she had a dream about her last day on Earth and that it was coming soon. And her guest was taken aback by this. Oh, Aunt Anita, what's going on? And she said, well, I had a dream the other night, and I was sitting in my rocking chair in my parlor waiting for my scholars to come. And in the dream, the ceiling and the roof over my head kind of faded away. 2 angels came down from the sky, picked me up in my rocking chair, and carried me up to heaven. Not only did she say this happened, she said that in real life, this was going to happen at 2 o'clock in the afternoon the following Wednesday. Well, this kind of alerted the family. Everybody's like, is Aunt Anita okay? Is she okay? So anyway, everybody's checking on Aunt Anita, and she's like, don't worry about it. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. So the next Wednesday afternoon, later in the afternoon, a couple of family members come to check on her, including Sean's mom. Sure enough, one of her scholars had shown up, and Aunt Anita had gone to sleep, and she had not awoken. The angels had come for her. And the interesting thing that Sean had to say about this was, first of all, she wasn't worried about it when everybody else was scrambling and saying, is Aunt Anita okay? She wasn't worried about it. Secondly, she seemed totally at peace, and when they found her, she had her hands folded in her lap and a little smile on her face. And Sean said, I think if you have to go, that's the way to do it.
And I couldn't agree more. That is just I'm going to use a word I don't like to use. That's a lovely story.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that I absolutely agree with you. That's one of the best stories.
Yeah, I like that. And that's the thing. I mean, certainly these ghostly folk out here tonight, the spooky airs we're hearing, that's certainly part of it, particularly around Halloween. But I think that the supernatural also has a softer side, and I think it's kind of like life. You have the scary, spooky things about life, and then you have kind of the midland stuff, and then you have the real kind of sweet stuff. And I think we have that in the supernatural, too. But tonight I know is dedicated to spooky.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that, because tonight's story kind of diverges away from spooky into a lovely story, if you will. Would you agree?
I would agree.
So, what do you think of when I say the name Willis Cooper?
I blank. You got me. I'm an old-time radio fan, but I don't know that name.
Well, he is the creator of the program called Lights Out, one of the most...
yes.
One of the biggest horror, scary-themed shows of the old-time radio, period. Well, he created Lights Out and then decided it wasn't good enough, and he wanted to do more, so he went and left Lights Out and gave it over to the folks that took it over, and they did a great job with it for, 10, 15 years that show was on. And he went off to create his own program, and what he ended up creating was a brand new program called Quiet Please. And he had a goal with this program, Jim. He decided that he wanted to create a program that didn't have the hoopla, that didn't have all the great sound effects and organ music and great actors. He wanted to create a program that was honest and it was thought-provoking.
Hey, that's kind of what I tried to do with the campfire.
There you go. And so he created Quiet Please, and I know I'm taking a long time to tell you, but that is where our story comes from tonight. It comes from Quiet Please. And it is a different story. It's a story with an Irish theme to it, but I think you're going to like it. And what I would recommend is turning the lights out and really listening to this one, because it's one that has a lot of deep stuff in it. So, Jim, are you game? Do you want to sit down and listen to this one?
Yes, I am. Quiet, please.
The name of the show is called Dark Rosaline. It first aired on March 13th, 1949, and is from the folks at...
Quiet, please. Quiet, please. The American Broadcasting Company presents Quiet, Please, which is written and directed by Willis Cooper, and which features Ernest Chappell. Quiet, Please for today is called Dark Rosaline.
There was a time when I loved the rain at night in the streets of New York. But that is a time long gone, and I remember the wet dark of a March evening only dimly now. And I find I have no desire now to return to it, though there was a time when I loved it. I remember the night I thought was to be my last night on this earth, and the streets were wet with the bitter rain of a waning winter that night. And I remember the sounds of New York that night. I remember the sound of tires on the asphalt, like the long, drawn-out sound of striking a kitchen match. I remember the skirl of whistles and the subterranean bellow of the subway. I remember the horn sounding wetly in the north and south traffic on 6th Avenue and the empty echo of voices between the buildings on 44th Street. I remember the unperturbed traffic lights, red and green beacons in the cold rain. And there was a red glow in the sky from Times Square behind me. And lonely yellow windows dim above me in the murk, where other lonely souls toiled the night away. And now I gaze on ragged rocks drenched in the spindrift of the sea, and beyond them landward the wholesome green hills lie peaceful on the breast of the land, and the sound of the pipe comes sweetly across the downs to me. And here the rain is a living thing, a great gray beast that comes from the sea to fling its fury against the ragged rocks and hasten inland to the hills as did the dark men who first came to these shores so many years ago. Thus have the remembrances of the place that was once my home faded away. And it is only when the Ides of March return that I sit here on the shore above the furious waters and remember the spires of the cathedral, closed about with the towering buildings of the city. And hear again the clamor of the carry pipes above the searching winds of the avenue. And now I think of the men that marched to the greater glory of Holy Patrick on his day in the morning, and the banners that wave above the gay paraders fly from me in my heart. For I have found dark Rosaline. It was such a weary time ago that I sat in that room in New York and heard those fatal words that sullen night of Friday the 13th. Their very memory has blurred now, but I remember them. The door opened, and Arnold closed it again quietly and stood for a moment silently against it. I remember how he did not look at me, how he stood there a moment in the thick, sick room silence. I remember I could not rise from my chair even when his voice trod on the silence of that ghastly place.
Wayne, you must be brave. It's a terrible
And I knew what he
thing.
was saying, but his voice seemed to come from a long way off, and his face was unclear in the dim
everything we
light.
could, Wayne.
And the pulse began to beat in my temples, and it was the dreadful truth that beat upon my head. I would not believe what he was saying.
Elizabeth is
I
dead.
would not acknowledge it.
Elizabeth
Still,
is
the
dead.
pulse hammered in my
Elizabeth
temples, and
is
I said to
dead.
myself, he is not
Elizabeth
saying
is
it.
Dead.
And I said, I will
Elizabeth
not
is dead.
believe it.
Dead.
And there was silence again. And in the silence, I heard a little small sound. And at last, I knew it was my own voice. And the keening of the women in the farther room rose above my own voice. And many hours after, I was alone. And there was no light.
There is small comfort in speaking to you of the hereafter at this time, Wayne.
Let me alone.
There is some comfort, perhaps, to remember that her last hours were peaceful. There was no pain, and she died in her sleep, unknowing.
Next Saturday was to be our wedding day.
I am sorry for you, Wayne.
I am beyond sorrow.
It will pass. Time is a great healer, Wayne. Time will
not heal these wounds, time nor anything. This is the end of my life.
You mustn't talk that way.
This is the end. I was a fool to think it was the beginning.
I know how you feel, Wayne.
You know how I feel. How can you know? You didn't love Elizabeth. You knew her, and she was another woman, another patient to stand over and to give medicine to. And to let die as you let her die.
Wayne!
I didn't mean that, Arnold. You did all you could, but she died. Elizabeth died. Oh, no. No, no, no.
Wayne, you mustn't.
Shall I tell you about Elizabeth? Shall I tell you of the dark hair of her flung wild in the wind of a summer's afternoon when we stood on a hill together? Shall I speak of her laughter like minted gold in the long morning light beside the sea? Did you know her blue eyes in the candle flame at midnight in the old high house where the road turns? I have held her hands in mine and marveled at her voice in the gloaming. And Elizabeth has said she loves me. And you say to me you must not. What is there left for me without Elizabeth? How shall I live without her? I will not live without her. No. You can't hold me here, Arnold.
Wayne!
Elizabeth!
No!
Elizabeth! And the streets were wet, and the streets were dark, and the sounds of New York I still remember. For what man is there could not remember his last day on earth? I heard the muted roar of the town, and the dark, hurrying figures of people were in my consciousness, too. But it was not the night to care for earthly things, and the cold rain descended, and the sodden streets gave back the echo wetly of my aimless footsteps. Say to me, man, if you have ever loved. And remember the black emptiness of your own heart if your mind was ever crossed with the thought of losing forever that dear one of yours. Say to me, woman sitting there, what you would have done in your own bright youth if the skinny hand of death had snatched your lover away. Or you too. Look at your wife, you man. Woman, look at your husband. Should the curtain of death descend between the two of you, what would your first thought be? Would you not say first in your grief, death, take me too? And so it was with me that bitter, bitter night. And I sought the arms of death, even as you would do. Do the oily ripples of the ebbing tide still finger the timbers of the ancient piers along the river? Does the mournful sound of the foghorn haunt your dreams of a rainy night in March? When the rain and the fog conspire to teach us what blackness there was once on all the earth? Do all the sad boats still ply across the bay in the night, and all the people on them huddle into the lighted places and think uneasily of what lies deep in the waters below? I stood there at the side of the water. And there I made my peace with the city that lay behind the swirling fog and the rain. The tall backdrop against which I played my final scene. And presently, as I stood composing myself, thinking sad last thoughts, all but forgetting lost Elizabeth in the grandeur of my own final gesture, presently, a figure came away from the shadows and walked slowly toward me. And I, like an actor who has lost his cue, paused irresolutely on the rain-soaked edge of the dock. And when he came closer, I turned impatiently, and my footing was insecure in the wet and the dark, and I all but fell into the swirl below.
Have a care, man.
Let me be.
You'd have fallen into the water.
Let go of me.
The tide being at the ebb, you'd have struggled in vain, and there'd be no one about to hear you choking and screaming in the dark. You'd be drowned, do you see?
Will you let me alone?
Come away from the water's edge, man. It's not safe.
Get away from me.
Drowning yourself in the river will not bring Elizabeth back.
What did you... Who are you?
Don't pull so. You'll fall.
What do you want?
I want you to come with me.
Well, I haven't done anything.
You were going to drown yourself.
Is it any of your business?
Come with me, Wayne. Come on with me.
How do you know my name?
I know your name, Wayne. And I knew Elizabeth. Come with me.
You're a policeman.
No, I'm not a policeman.
You said you knew Elizabeth.
Come with me.
Where?
Well, wherever it is, it's better than a watery death, son.
No.
Son, I'm an older man than you. And I tell you, it's no good.
You're not older than I.
Oh, yes, I am, Wayne.
You knew Elizabeth.
Elizabeth wouldn't want you to do this.
Elizabeth?
Elizabeth wants you to live, Wayne.
Live? What's there to live for?
Why, will you come with me then, and maybe I'll show you.
I cannot say now what was the compulsion that led me to follow his steps down the dockside and out to the end of the wharf in the darkness. I cannot say, but I am glad this day that I heeded his words. In the soaking cold rain along the dockside in the dark, to a ladder at the end. And he paused and took my arm again and pointed down.
You were not afraid of the water a moment ago, Wayne.
And I looked at him. And in the gloom, it seemed that I could see the glow of the little lantern at the end of the dock, though he stood between me and the light.
Down the ladder to the boat, Wayne.
The ladder was wet and clammy to my hands, and I could hear the wooden rungs creak beneath my weight. I did not know why I followed him, for I could see no boat in the water below. But I have spoken of a compulsion. And though he spoke quietly enough in the night, I followed him.
Will you sit in the stern then, Wayne, while I row?
Now, was there ever such a scene? The bereaved man, the lorn lover, the grief-stricken man about to take his own life for a lost love and foiled at it by an utter stranger in the dark, and setting off in a cockle shell of a coracle in the windy waters of a March night with the same total stranger. I said to him, "Where are we going?" And I could feel that he was smiling, although he didn't answer. I said again to him, "Do you know where you're going?"
For a young man that was about to take his own life a few minutes ago, you show overmuch concern.
We'll be run down by a boat.
We will not. But if we do, you will drown and die, and is that not what you want?
Well,
You want to choose your own way of dying, is that it?
Where are we going?
You're forgetting Elizabeth in your concern for yourself, Wayne.
I've not forgotten Elizabeth.
Do not forget her, Wayne. For if you forget her...
What?
Do not forget her.
Where are we?
What do you care?
Well,
Be silent and think of Elizabeth.
And the waves rose higher and higher, and the wind came down about my ears, and we seemed to be going faster and ever faster through the night. And always the silent man sat over against me in the little boat, and though the waves grew mountain high in the wild night, still he plied his oars, and still we traveled on upon the face of the deep. And now there was no light to be seen, and the flying scud all but smothered me, and I grew desperately cold in the open boat. And again I asked him, "Where are we going?"
Be still.
And my thoughts would not compose. And at last I fell into a kind of restless sleep, cold and wet, and direly unhappy there in the boat alone upon the ocean. And through my sleep I seemed to hear strange music and the voice of my companion in the boat. And there was poetry in his words.
Out of the glowing west as the sun was dying behind them, up from the sea in the night by the light of the moon, dark were the boats, and dark were the men in the darkness, seeking the shore of the sea as they chanted their song in the night, seeking the Shan van Vogt, the undying, sorrowful mother, seeking the Shan van Vogt on the shore where the Shannon descends. Stretch out your arms, O Shan van Vogt, stand on the headlands and show us the way. Weep for your sons, O sorrowful mother. The black boats are sailing. Bring us the day.
And when I opened my eyes, the first rays of the sun sped across the waters to me. And the broad land lay before us, and there was a great lazy river that came down out of the hills. And a fresh wind was blowing at our backs, and we rushed along on the calm breast of the sea. And I rubbed my eyes, and I asked my companion in amazement, "Where are we?" And he smiled and shook his head and did not answer. And the shore drew nearer and nearer. And I remembered the poetry in my dreams, and I leaned over to him, and I said, "Answer me."
Well, you haven't asked me anything yet, Wayne.
I said, "Where are we?"
You'll know in a moment.
And what is the Jean van Vogt?
Ask rather, who is the Jean van Vogt?
Who is she?
Why, Wayne, she has many names. But the name we know best is the sorrowful mother, the weeping one, who does not always weep for grief, but sometimes for joy.
Who?
Oh, she has many names. And of all the women of all the world, she is the fairest, my son. And she is the one that the fear bogs, the very dark men, sang to as they sailed their black boats across the sea from beyond the setting sun.
I heard you in my dreams, I think.
I spoke of them. I spoke of the song they sang, and it may be I even sang it. She and I are old, old friends, the Jean van Vogt and I.
And what is this place we're coming to ourselves?
Oh, have you forgotten Elizabeth and all your curiosity, then?
I've not forgotten Elizabeth. Where are you taking me?
Why, to a certain place, Wayne. Wayne, Seamus, Colum, O'Phelan.
I don't understand.
You will.
And he shook his head and laid on the oars again. And the little black boat headed toward the mouth of the great gentle river. And there grew higher land on either side, and the green hills stretched away beyond. And I saw a woman standing on the beach at the estuary as we drew closer. And for a moment my heart leaped in me, for her hair was dark like Elizabeth's, and she had the figure that I remembered so well. And then I knew sharp despair again, for Elizabeth was dead. But I think my companion must have seen the gathering tears in my eyes, for he spoke very gently.
You remember Elizabeth again?
I have not forgotten Elizabeth. I will not forget Elizabeth.
That is well, my son.
But tell me, what is this place?
Look about you.
And we were in the very mouth of the river. And the blue of the sea had turned now to a kind of golden green from the silt that the river brings down from the hills far beyond. And I looked, and the low hills stretched away as far as I could see. And the sun shone on a scene of peace. And I fancied I could hear birds singing.
You'd know where you are then, Wayne Abu.
Where?
Look, on your left hand, that is Clare. And on your right is the land of Kenmare. Is it not a beautiful sight then in the morning?
It is that.
I've always loved it.
And we drew nearer to the shore. And I looked on the shore, and the woman was standing there by the waterside. And she was dressed in a green flowing gown, and her hair was dark, like I've heard is the wing of a raven. And her face was peaceful to look upon, though ravaged with tears. And I looked from her to my companion in the boat, and he spoke to me.
That is the Jean van Vogt.
And the keel of the little boat grated to the shore, and I stood up, and the woman spoke to me. And her voice was like my mother's voice as I remembered it, although the words she spoke were in a strange tongue.
See it, Miller, child.
And she took my hand, and I stepped out of the boat, and she turned to my companion.
And see it, Miller, child, to you, Padre. You have been away over long, Padre.
And I said, Patrick. Patrick! And when I turned to look at him again, he had vanished from my sight. And I turned back to the lovely woman who had greeted me, and she was smiling on me.
Welcome home, Wayne Seamus Callum O'Pyle.
Now I thought perhaps that I had come to those Isles of the Blessed that are spoken of in the old books. And I thought perhaps this place was heaven, for it was very fair. And I thought in my heart for a moment, perhaps I shall find Elizabeth here. For I was not sure what this place was, and it seemed that the heaven I had heard of could not possibly be fairer. And I may say to this day that as yet I have had no foretaste, no view of heaven yet vouchsafed to me. Yet if heaven shall be fairer than this land set down in a shining sea, then it will be heaven indeed. And in the long days, which were the days of spring, I wandered by myself along the shore, and the sun was good, and the sea was endless. And when the night came, there were the stars, and the night breeze was sweet. And then the thoughts of Elizabeth came back again to haunt me. And always my wonder grew. Had I indeed taken my life, and was this the Elysian field? Was this the limbo for unjudged souls? Was I dead myself, and wandering till a judgment day?
It is a true land, Wayne. Feel the grass beneath your feet. Hearken to the sound of the waves. And be sure it is all real.
I'm lost.
You weep for your lost Elizabeth.
I shall never cease to weep for her. Sean Van Vogt.
A day'll come, Wayne.
No day for me.
A day comes when grief is forgotten.
No.
When you know dark Rosaline.
No. Who is dark Rosaline? Who are you? Who is Patrick?
We would none of us live save for Patrick. Patrick brought the word to us. Patrick came from the lands far beyond yonder sea. And Patrick brought the cross to us all here.
He is a young man.
Patrick led us all from the dark mysteries of the pagan hills. And it was Patrick's hand that has kept us safe for all these years of our life. I have not always been fair, Wayne. This place has not always been fair. Great dragons breathing fire and dire serpents were in the hills, till Patrick banished them. And I have found much to weep for. Wherefore they call me the sorrowful mother, the Shan Van Vogt. But as Patrick says, in these latter days, I do not always weep for you.
Tell me, Shan Van Vogt. I was about to die for the love of a lost one.
I know.
Is she here? Is Elizabeth here?
Dark Rosaline is here.
And then, when I looked up at her from the ground, there was another woman standing where she had stood. And this one was young and fair, and her hair was dark, and her eyes were blue, and she smiled upon me. And for a moment my heart stopped, for she spoke in Elizabeth's voice.
Diad mille to my love.
And I sprung to my feet, and my voice shook as I took her hand in mine, for the hand was the hand of my lost love, Elizabeth.
I am Rosaline, dark Rosaline.
Elizabeth, my lost Elizabeth. When the sun rises up on the day that is yours, whether I walk the sands of the desert, or whether I shall sail the seven seas, whether I prosper or whether I beg in the streets, whether I be living or though I die, I swear I will remember dark Rosaline to her eternal honor.
All right, Jim. Different, not necessarily scary, but I would give it on the spook factor a pretty high rating. What did you think of Dark Rosaline?
The one thing that reminded me a little bit of It's a Wonderful Life, when he was, getting ready to take his own life. But then it was kind of like, where are they? Where are they in this boat? Where are they going to? Did he somehow? The first thing I thought, did he actually jump, and is he going over to the other side? And then it really came into view. It was Ireland and so forth, and then how the voices changed when the different characters, female characters, changed. I thought that was really wild how they did that, because it was very, very smoothly. And it was kind of creepy.
Yeah, it was. And that's kind of why I picked it. It is not something that you would say, oh, wow, that's just really Halloweenish. But it does have that spook factor that you just don't get from a lot of today's programs, number one. And a lot of even the scary programs don't have you in your mind going, where am I? What am I doing? I, like you, thought of he was going to his death, and I was thinking the river Styx. That's kind of where I went with it.
There you go.
But
that's interesting.
Yeah, that and of course I was wrong too. but it got me to thinking, and I did a little bit of research, as I'm prone to do, as you well know. And I did some research on Dark Rosaline, and it turns out it's an actual Irish poem.
Oh, really? I didn't have time to look it up. I was going to look it up. Tell us about it.
Well, it's a poem written by James Clarence Mengen, who was born in Dublin. He was educated at a Jesuit school where he learned the rudiments of Latin, Spanish, French, Italian. And so he had quite the background of being able to do this. And his idea was to write a poem and make it dark, make it fierce, but make it a love song. And so in reality, the original poem is an Irish love song.
Oh, my. I wonder what our ghosts around here thought of it. They looked like, when it was playing, it looked like they were at rapt attention.
Well, shall we take a mic out and see what they have to say?
Absolutely. I'm all for getting the people in. I'm in audience participation's great.
All right. Well, let's start here with you. I see you've got your head back on. What did you think of the story today? Really interesting. I wouldn't have thought a ghost reacted that way. Jim, what did you think of what the ghost had to say?
Well, it's certainly a unique response, I can say that. And, it's interesting. I talk to people from all around the world, but getting to actually talk to the ghosts themselves tonight and get some questions, it really kind of gives you a new look at this. Kind of The Other Side is actually the name of one of my Plus podcasts, but this really is the other side.
Yeah. I'm trying to ignore it, but there's been a goblin with his hand up.
Well, hey, I'm for equal participation. Let's be fair and give the goblin a chance. Goblins are people too. Well, I don't know if that's technically correct, but you know what I mean.
All right, so I'm going to allow you to handle this one, Jim.
Please tell us your question.
Me thinks your story dumb and too soft for goblin. Want smash with hammer and eat meat from Rosaline. Yum.
Well, I don't think they were shooting for the goblin audience.
I would say so.
I think it's a different market, but I'm sure there's some good goblin stuff. Lord of the Rings would probably be pretty good, right?
We goblins like Jim Harold's stories. Make laughing, not smash.
Okay, I'll take that. Long as you like my stories, I'm good with it. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe in iTunes.
Any closing thoughts on our Dark Rosaline story?
Well, again, I think it's real. And I was reading a little bit about the background of the show and how it was like the descendant in some ways of the Mercury Theater of the Air, as if you trace the lineage back. And it was interesting how the moderator or the main actor in it kind of was very Orson Welles-like in kind of narrating this through. It did actually remind me a little of the War of the Worlds in that way. But the thing is that I was just seeing today where, Audible is doing this thing with Audible channels, and there's all these podcasts dedicated to theater and audio drama. And the thing of it is, it seems like old-time radio is something that faded for about 50 years. Everybody forgot about it. And then with the internet, people started to get introduced to it for the first time, because most of us who listen to this now weren't around then. And it's getting a revival. So hearing the older stuff and now seeing that people are producing new stuff, it's very exciting. I think we're in a second golden age of audio, and it's great to be a part of it.
I love that you said that, because I've been saying that to people for a long time, that this is the second age of golden age of audio. You got shows like your programs, which are just fantastic because it gives the standard Joe the opportunity to tell his side of things, what happened to him, and an outlet for it, which was gone from 1962 to present, has been gone, and now it's back. And I think that bringing that back to people.
Yeah, well, it's a funny thing. When I worked in traditional radio, I had a boss who loved Stan Freberg. The guy, people now would recognize him for, he had some great records back in the late 50s, early 60s. He did this whole thing and made Lake Michigan into a banana split. And they did that via audio. And he says, I challenge anybody to do that on television. That's the great thing about audio.
It is. And that's what Ron's Amazing Stories is all about. Telling tales from many points of view with as many twists as I can fit in. This keeps the listeners happy, and me too. Oh, and just in case you didn't know, Jim Harold and his broadcasts are in the same business. Tell us about it, Jim.
I agree. I hope that people will check out some of my stories over at jimharold.com, jimharold.com. And I have Jim Harold's Campfire, and also another free show called The Paranormal Podcast. And I invite people to listen to that. And also I hope that they'll check out the book that you so masterfully edited.
And, well, I wouldn't have had a book to edit if you hadn't written it. So it's a great book, and I know that it's available right now on Amazon.
Correct. You can get it in Kindle for only $2.99. What a deal. And then you can also get it in paperback if you prefer the Dead Tree version.
And not only that, but you have a host of other books and materials available to people. And what I recommend with Jim Harold is starting, if you've never tried it before, go to jimharold.com and delve in there, because what you're going to find is paranormal.
And it's been a pleasure to be with you tonight.
And it's been a pleasure to have you, Jim. You're welcome back anytime. And I'm going to say thank you for coming tonight. And the ghosts are all clapping their hands, although it doesn't appear to be making a whole lot of noise.
Well, Ron, thank you. And thank you out there, all the ghosts. And thank you, the living who are listening.
Well, I want to thank Jim Harold for coming back again this year. It was a pleasure, and from the looks of these happy ghostly faces, you did it again. To listeners, I say thank you, and come back next week as we return to normal programming, if there is such a thing for us. If you want to keep up with what's happening on Ron's Amazing Stories, please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or sign up for the weekly newsletter. All the links you'll need and access to the blog can be found at ronsamazingstories.com. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.